Okay, let's get into what we really wanted to talk about today, and that is the tests that have been released for the individuals for semifinals. And to help us do that, we have our good friend, I think our most frequent guest on the show, Pat Vellner. Pat, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. Thanks so much for taking the time to do this. We were just talking before we came on here. You're going for your 9th overall appearance at the CrossFit Games, your 8th as an individual. That's nuts. Right. What's the level of anxiety going into semifinals for you now that you're a seasoned vet?
My wife asked me that the other day. She's like, "Are you nervous about this?" It's like, yeah, still, yeah. I don't think it ever really changes, right? I wouldn't still be doing it 9 years down the road if I didn't care enough to get a little nervous when things really matter, right? So, yeah, I mean, there's still nerves, and it's exciting though, right? It's like that type of anxiety that's a good mix of nervous and excitement.
And you say when things really matter. For what percentage of the athletes doing the semifinals, do you think that this stage of competition is almost like this is the one?
Well, it's kind of different now. I don't know. We'll see how different it is with the new power ranking thing and the additional spots and what kind of effect that really has. Because, I mean, I don't know. To be honest, I think the West men get 9 spots, and like I'm probably reasonably safe with 9 spots. But, you know, in years past, like with regionals and semifinals, if you don't show up at this stage of competition, you go home, right? So the stakes couldn't be higher. At the end of the day, even if you just make it to the games and withdraw, like you still went to the games and whatever, there's some opportunities that come with that. But this is a big ticket. Like this stage of competition is very do or die for everybody that's involved. And especially because it's such a short competition, when you're looking at 6, maybe 7 tests, there's really not a lot of room for hiccups. You know, one mistake can really blow it for you. So, in that regard, that's where, you know, it's extra stressful. You know, you can afford to have a miss here and there at the games when there's 15 events to wash it out. But when you've only got 6 times on the floor, they all matter a lot. So
well, and even at the games, if you blow it up, you know, blow an event, there's only 40 competitors. Here there are 60, so the price could even be more steep.
Yeah, it's definitely, execution is going to matter a lot. So I think you have to remember that. And yeah, you do well to not forget that there's a lot of hungry competitors out there, and everybody's very fit. So you can't exactly just walk through these ones.
Well, then let's jump into it.
I was going to say, we're going to walk through these ones right now.
Let's walk through them. Let's see if I can do this correctly, and we can bring the tests up here on the screen so we can all look at them. Okay, so we got test 1, 4-time, a 3,000 meter echo bike, a hand over hand pull of 84 feet, 2,000 meters on the assault runner, and then another hand over hand pull, 84 feet, 1,000 meters on the ski erg, and a hand over hand pull of, they've added 8 feet in there, 92 feet, 30-minute time cap, 225 on the pull for the men, 180 for the women. That's gross.
This one looks kind of, I don't know. I think it might not be the most fun one to watch, but I actually think it's kind of a fun workout to do. It'll be interesting. I'm like, you know, you try to think about where we've done similar things, like the 2-stroke pull comes to mind from the games in 2018. The rope chipper comes to mind from 2016. You know, I have a little bit of an advantage having a lot of years to look back on. But there's some things that we've done in the past that are similar, and I think, you know, I can compete in the second week of semifinals, which is nice because we kind of get to see what that floor is going to look like, how those transitions will look, how it's set up. You know, when we did the rope chipper, we had about 100-foot rope. That was like a 90-foot rope pull at the end of that workout. So we know that they can set up a rope that's that long. But I don't know, like nowadays with the rubber flooring that the surface company does, how's that sled move on the rubber? We don't know. Like 225-pound sled doesn't tell you anything. Anybody will know that like what matters is friction, right? Like I could have a really light weight on the sled, but if it's really grippy on the floor, it feels really heavy.
Yeah.
So we don't know what level of. slide you're going to get. Like that pull could take anywhere from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, right? Like it just really, really depends. So we don't know how much of this workout is determined on the machines and how much is determined on the sled. So it's kind of interesting in that regard, and I'm a little bit happy to get to watch it once before I have to do it.
Well, and it doesn't even say sled. Like it's a hand over hand pull.
Mm-hmm.
They implement, like, in theory, could be something else. I know in general, Pat, that you're a fan of getting information kind of later rather than earlier. When, but if you were going at week one, would you feel that there was some kind of a disadvantage finding out on site, knowing that the next week competitors will have a week to know what you didn't?
Not really. Like, I think the reality is you're only competing against the people with the same notice as you, right? So there's no real disadvantage. You have to go into that knowing it's the same when you do an open announcement or something. You go and you do it with little time, and you know that the people later are going to see what you did, and they're going to polish what you did, and your times are going to get beat. Nothing's going to stand for 3 or 4 weeks. But that doesn't really matter. That's ego stuff at the end of the day. But I think sort of thing I would love to do with little preparation. I think the later you are, you just sort of end up training for these workouts or these same movements over the span of 3 or 4 weeks, which can get a little bit boring. So I'd rather rip the Band-Aid off and just go for it. But having the opportunity to watch people do it, it will be interesting. I think everybody's going to be looking at what kind of splits the fastest guys hold on the machines, and how much it costs when it comes to time to do those drags. And it'll be interesting to see what they allow on the sled pull as well, if it has to be a true hand over hand, if you're allowed to do double arm pulling, what the standard is as far as keeping your feet in place and what have you. Like, there's a lot of information that will come out, and my guess is we won't get a full breakdown of it officially until you're at the briefing. So watching it is the only other way to gather that information.
Yeah, because I had a couple of notes that I had put down. One obviously was sled type versus the floor, because rope chipper was on the tennis stadium floor, and they had it was like an artificially sprayed on floor that they would use each year. The last time with two stroke, it was on the grass, so it was a slightly different level of friction, and obviously the regional semifinals floor looks different. So I'm curious what they had, but like Brian said, there's a good point. That doesn't necessarily say a sled. Last time at two-stroke pull, you were allowed to, as long as you kept your feet in place, right? It was like you couldn't move your feet. It was like you could hand over hand and heave a little bit with your hips, but it's just no feet movement.
And I think it was the same with the rope chipper. Like, you could do heaving pulls, but you had to try to keep your feet within this box that was like a 3x3 foot box or something like that. So if you did a big pull and stepped out, you weren't supposed to do that, but there wasn't any consequence. They didn't make you go push the sled back or anything like that. So it'll be interesting to see if they apply some rules, how they plan to enforce them, because that has been something that has been missing in the past. And so we'll see what that looks like. Again, it's nice to be able to see it and say, oh, we're allowed to do this, we're not allowed to do that. And then you have the chance to just make sure that you let other people run out first and make the mistakes, and then we get to swoop in later and look heroic and fast and fit, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say the other thing that I had noted is that because we have dual competition floors, we don't know how that's going to be used, but it would seem like this would be a way to, at least for this test, you would try to find a way to do larger heats, right? Like with the time domain being a time cap of 30 minutes, and for the big ones you have 60 athletes.
Yeah, and you're going to be sharing. That's a good point, because Friday is when the individuals start. Right. And so you're going to be sharing time with the teams as well. So that's a really good point.
So you would that one have, I don't know if you could do 15, you could do 20 person heats on that. It really depends on how they line up and do the floor layout with all those machines.
But where do you think, Pat, knowing what you know about this, obviously there's still some information that needs to come out, but where's the crux of this test for you?
Well, I don't want to show my hand completely here. I think when you look at it, like, anybody with any reasonable sense will be like, I think it's 3,000 meter bike on the Echo is different. Not a lot of people ride the Echo bike for distance. And it's something we don't probably do often in training, because up to now in competition, we've always been doing calories or something like that. Right. So I think that's something that Boz has thrown in that just is a bit of a wrench, and it doesn't affect you a ton, but you got to go play with it. Like, I've got to go to the gym and be like, when I'm accumulating meters versus calories, does the machine react the same way? Is there point of diminishing return or whatever. Like you just don't have the same level of comfort and confidence with those units. So you got to play with it. And so I think you're going to see, like anything that starts with a long echo bike, though, probably nobody's going to hammer the bike at the start. You've got to go be deliberate, but you can't do anything dumb. Depending on how hard the sled moves, that could very easily be the crux of the workout. And then the machines are just very steady effort. But, you know, I think when you look at the end there and you do a hard ski into that final sled pull, that's where it's going to come down to, right? Like that's where the exciting race is going to be. You spend the longest time on the run machine, but I don't think anybody's going to hammer the run that fast. But you know, you blow your arms out skiing really fast, and then you have to just pull for all your worth on the sled at the end there. Like that last couple movements is obviously where the whole thing's going to be dictated. So, you know, I think you can't waste time. Like you can really quickly lose 30 seconds on each of those machines if you're standing around. And I don't think you can afford to blow a minute, 90 seconds coming to the end of that workout and make it up. So you've got to hang in there, and then I think you've just got to be tough on those last two. Like there's just no other way around it. Like your arms are going to be blown up, but whoever can pull on that ski well and then still have the juice on the sled at the end is going to win it.
All right.
Do you have an estimate of how many calories 3,000 meters on the echo bike is?
80, 83,
Okay.
85.
Oh, he just that was
A
like
lot.
Okay.
And
Depends
he
how fast.
answered
Depends
very
how fast you
quickly.
bike, I think. But it depends a bit on your bike pace. But I think it's roughly.
I thought you didn't want to show your hand.
I don't know. I bet you it's 70 to 85. Because you look at it time wise, right? Like it's probably
Yeah.
like 4 minutes.
that's
in a
for
bit, 4.5
Pat Vellner,
minutes.
not Pat Vellner. That's for
I don't know, but I bet you it's less than 100, but probably like 75, significantly more than 50.
Well, that takes us to test 2. So we got 5 ring complexes,
Mm.
being 1 toes to ring, which we haven't done since the 2019 games.
Yep.
1 muscle up and 1 ring dip. So that's 1 rep. Then 20 single leg squats, and then max burpees over a box. And you get to wear a 20-pound ruck. Do the men. And they get a 30-inch box. Women get a 10-pound ruck and a 24-inch box. You got 3 rounds. You rest 1 minute between rounds, and your score is your total reps across the 3 rounds. So you've worn a ruck before doing pulling movements, because I think the Rogue Invitational did this one year, right?
Yeah, Rogue had rope climbs
Mm-hmm.
in 2021.
Yep.
And Wadapalooza did it too, Brian?
And they did loose.
And that was 2020, I think.
Yep.
So, okay, so let's start with that. For people who have never done any sort of gymnastics movements while wearing a ruck, how does that affect the way that you do the movement? Because that weight is not evenly distributed like it is with a vest.
Yeah, the weight's all on your back, right? So it makes a big difference, especially with kipping movements. I'd say when we did rope climbs, it's a little different, but it's still, you know, you lean back and you look up to the rope, or you turn over on the rings when you're using a swing. At some point, your torso kind of ends up levered back. And when you've got all the weight on your back versus split half front and back with a vest, you know, the leverage is different, and it can kind of pin you backwards. So it changes the way that you have to do those things. You know, they're not super comfortable shoulder straps all the time. But I think depending on what kind of ruck bag we get, it's going to make a very big difference. I think the presence of a waist strap is necessary, in my opinion. If they don't have a waist strap, it's actually a very dangerous workout.
I think specifically for even the burpees, like you can have that plate just slide
Both
up.
of them, burpees and muscle ups, both. People are going to catch plates to the back of the head, no doubt.
Oh.
Yeah.
And even with a waist strap, if you don't have your bag placed well or like strapped up the way you need it, it will hit you in the head.
I'm hopeful that they have the Go Ruck guys there like they did in Miami that year to give a tutorial and make sure that these athletes are using the equipment the way it's meant to be used.
Yeah.
I was going to ask,
think
do they normally have somebody there to help fit you in them, or is it just guessing?
they have in the past, but you can't control what people do on the floor, right? So I'll tell you something from personal experience. When we did loose in 2020 at the Wadapalooza, 3 rounds, 10 ring muscle ups. The first 2 rounds, I did 10 unbroken. But when I would run, I would loosen my bag up a little bit. And then before I would do muscle ups, I would tighten it a bunch to just stick it to the back and whatever. But in the last round, I just forgot. I was like already thinking about the finish, and I forgot. And I did like the first couple muscle ups on the last set, and I hammered myself in the back of the head with the plate. So I think that in a workout like that, where people may in the break time they want to loosen it to get some extra breath in, you got to remember to tighten it back up. Like it could very easily happen that you can tell people everything, you can set them up all you want, but if they start to loosen their bag when they're on the floor, there's nothing you can do, right? So the ruck bags are, I think it's something that they should really harp on, that we want to make sure that people stay safe, because like Brian said too, when you bend down and hinge really deep in the burpee to go to the floor, it can have the same effect where that bag just starts to ride up towards the back of your head. So, they almost be better off to just give us all helmets.
Pat, taking the obviously if you use the equipment correctly, that's the optimal scenario out of it. What's the main difference here in using a ruck compared to a muscle up, and do you think it has any effect on the performance of the athletes?
Using a ruck compared to having no weight?
Sorry, a weight vest.
It's placement of the weight. It changes the way your kip is. I think what it does is it rewards people with really strong gymnastics skill. And that's not to say that like you have, how do I put this? If you have a lot of experience swinging on a bar and really good gymnastics control of your swing, you can understand how to move with external load. But if all you have is like, whenever I do muscle ups, I do the same swing, I know what like my one kip is, and you're not adaptable and you don't know how to manipulate that within certain parameters, it might be difficult, because some people kip a certain way, and the way that weight sits might really restrict their ability to turn over or whatever it might be. I think you probably need not to do a strict muscle up, but your muscle up will feel much more strict likely with a weight like that on. So I don't know. I think it's a very different movement. The kip, the timing of the kip and all the stuff is going to be completely changed.
That's
and
interesting.
it's similar for a weight vest, but it's changed in a different way. So it's a good thing that they released this ahead of time, because I think it gives people a fighting chance to play with it.
Do you think there's going to be athletes that were surprised to see fail any of the complex just because of the way that the weight moves around that maybe they're not used to?
I think so.
It seems like in this instance, because hearing you talk about it almost feeling more strict, that the toes to ring, they kind of seem like a nuisance to me in terms of like the way that works. You're going to just basically stall out your momentum a little bit. I think
maybe your swing's less continuous. I do look at that complex, and it looks like a long time to hang on the rings.
Yeah.
Because I think toes to rings are not that difficult. I don't think the bag affects it at all, but it's slow.
Yeah.
I think you're just going to be like, it's an extra long time to just be hanging on. So, it might be beneficial for people to break them up a little ways and make sure you're not, failing your other parts of the complex. I'm also assuming that if you fail any part of the complex, it's like done, because it's full complex together. Like I couldn't do a toe to ring, come down, jump up, do a muscle up and a ring jump.
Sure.
Like I'm guessing. So I don't know. I think that there might be some nuance with how people can choose to attack that section. And obviously, I think it's a lot different for men and women.
Yeah. Well, this one, I feel like there's a lot that we can learn about how this will play out with more information as relative to some of the others. Like again, do you have to do the whole complex through and through? It just says 20 single leg squats, but we saw on the team workout, they were listed as unbroken. So is there going to be any stuff there, or they're just going to let you hammer through those? They say max burpees over the box with a 30-inch. Is it a big soft box? Are they going to let you use your hands?
I'd imagine they'd let you use your hands just for safety purposes.
Yeah.
There might be a rule about it swinging your feet out to the side, but
yeah, or like you have to tap your feet on top.
Yeah, if they allowed you to use your hands but still required you to touch both feet on the top of the box, and you do that kind of like gorilla hop over, that's probably a possibility. But I hope that the pistols just stay alternating. I think there's a lot going on in this workout.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's like it's okay to add levels of complexity, but I don't think you need to add multiple levels of complexity to each movement. So to me already, looking at the ring complex, that's a new thing we've never done and probably is fine and didn't need to have a ruck bag on it. But then we added double layers of complexity to a ring movement. Okay, fine. Single leg pistols, weighted pistols is already an added level of complexity to the pistol. So then to be like weighted pistols also all on one leg, now you've got back-to-back movements with 2 layers of complexity on them that are kind of like it's starting to get like a little bit out of control at that point for me. So I think for simplicity's sake, it probably is fine alternating. So I hope that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, let's go to 3. So test 3 is a kind of a repeat. We did this in 2018 regionals. It's Linda. We're going to do 10 down to 1 by 1 of deadlifts, dumbbell bench presses. So that's a big difference. We're going to sub out the barbell for a dumbbell. 220-pound deadlifts for the women, 60-pound dumbbells, and 105-pound squat cleans. For the men, it's 295-pound deadlifts, 90-pound dumbbells, and 145-pound squat cleans. So there you go. And Pat, you did this back in 2018 when it was the barbell version. What, if anything, I mean, it's pretty similar, but what do you take from that experience that you apply here?
Did anybody remember what the cap was in 2018?
It was 17.
It was the same? Okay.
Yeah.
I honestly, when it came up, I was a little bit disappointed because I think the last time CrossFit programmed this whole stage of competition, they programmed this workout. So I was a bit like, it's like we just did this. But also I think there's not a lot of people that are still hanging around from 2018 still. Like that's 5 years ago now, right? So I kind of forget that sometimes. But it's a good workout. I think that the cap being the same with the dumbbells will be harder, and mostly because it's easier to get in and out of the setup of the barbell bench press than it is in the dumbbell. You got to take the weights from the ground and you got to get them up. The way we've had dumbbell bench judged in the past was with the starting position being at the top.
Yep.
So it depends if they allow you to like lay back with the dumbbells and then press from the bottom and have that be 1, or do you have to get them up and then start from the top? That's going to make a big difference about what goes on in this workout, especially in those last few rounds where you're trying to kind of hurry up and get through the end. But if you can't just lay back and go, you've got to really like manipulate them up under fatigue. And when your chest is already failing, you might see some really costly fails near the end there on those dumbbells. And I think you will anyways. There's a lot more to control with the open chain dumbbell bench than with the barbell bench. So I think it'll be cool to see how people work with those dumbbells. But
Pat,
I mean,
for people at this level, will the effect of the ring muscle up complex on the pecs affect the dumbbell bench the next day?
Yeah, I think it will. I think in training it might not, but I think in competition it will.
Because I was just thinking, obviously it's been 5 years since Linda, and we could say the dumbbells are maybe a little harder, but that was on day 1, and the only thing preceding it that year was running, rowing, and double unders that are not going to have too much of an impact. Whereas here, I think that I agree with you that there'll be some residual effect from event number 2 specifically, that we might not see faster times than we did 5 years ago.
Oh, I think you wouldn't either way because the dumbbells are so much more challenging than the bench. Even if you put this first, I don't think you would, because just the extra time pulling the dumbbells from the ground and getting them settled. If you had the exact same floor set up for everything else, that alone would probably stop people from being faster, because it's going to cost you an additional 5 seconds per round minimum per time you have to pick up the dumbbells probably. So that's going to add up really fast. So I think that regardless, the dumbbells is more time consuming in terms of setup. But yeah, I mean, I think that like competition intensity versus training is always different. And I think the burpee get up overs with the ruck bag are also going to add up a bit on the press, not just the ring complex. So I think that there's going to be some effect to that for sure. I mean, I'm sure that, everybody's going to probably test it out this weekend and find out for themselves. But I would assume that that'll be the case. There's not much you can do about it. I don't know how much it's going to change your game plan, but I won't be surprised when I feel that way.
Yeah, and in 2018, you were allowed a spotter as well. So, I mean, the cost of a failed rep, right? Someone's there to pick it up versus the squirreliness of a dumbbell, and you end up taking that 90
Yeah.
a little
I
left.
mean, you hope that there's not anybody really like failing out to the side or missing some to the side wide, and then they're rolling into your neighbor's lane and rolling under their bench.
Pulling
right?
a Vellner with your weight rolling across the floor.
So we'll have to see. I mean, I'm sure they'll have some guidelines about controlling your dumbbell. But we'll see. I mean, it's probably not a bad idea for them to stagger the bench slightly just in case, right? I don't know. But yeah, you're totally right.
And well, the loading, other two movements exactly the same, but the relative loading this year for the men versus women is slightly down as well. The ratio is 66% versus 69%. Because going back and watching some of that stuff after this was announced, that seemed to be relatively where the women lost time to the men. Like some of the top scores were pretty comparable. Like if you go look, like Cashin was sub 13, Matt was sub 13, Pat, you were right around 13, but the total number of women finishers under the cap was significantly lower.
And you're saying now the women's percentage is higher?
It's lower. So 69% last time, it's 66 this year. It's probably negligible, but at least it's a little bit lower. Whereas, like, we've had this conversation with Brian talking about how women have progressed to the point where some of the other movements you could actually go north of 70%, 75%, depending on what the movement is.
Yeah, I would actually say overall, generally the women get a pretty free ride on loading.
Yeah. But the one thing that I don't think,
I think that the women are stronger than we give them credit for when the loading
sure.
comes up sometimes. Like when it comes to barbell movement, stuff like that, the ladies move those bars really fast and really well. So that actually kind of surprises me to hear. I would have thought it might go the other way as the sport advances. But they get a 10-pound ruck bag, they get easier weights than Linda. Like, well, just feed it.
I think it's just for the bench, though. I think that's
I was going to ask, is the dumbbells the same?
The dumbbells is the one that's lower. Everything else is the same as it was last time. I just think this movement in particular is,
And there's a lot of boys out there that love to bench, so I don't know.
But the one exception I would say for the women is the upper body pressing, whether it's vertical or horizontal. I don't think they've caught up as much in that domain as every other one with weightlifting.
Yeah. I think you're probably right.
Well, let's go
upper body pulling likely as well, I would say.
Yeah. All right, let's go to the next two. So these are back to back. So you're going to run 800 meters, and then you're going to do your max snatch. Ooh, okay. Then you get at 6-minute time cap. So you get a 2-minute rest, and then you go do test 5. That's 8 snatches, 185 for the men, 125 for the women, and then you run 800 meters, another 6-minute time cap. Wow.
So what do you think about this one?
Well, man, I mean, it's like how many attempts do you want to make in that first one? Like how bad you want to burn it down on the 800 to give yourself enough time to get a couple good lifts in, or do you want to kind of lollygag it and hit a couple?
Well, it's sorry to cut you, but like Pat, you brought up something last time we had you on when you talked about Boz has a lot of like high execution pieces built into it, and like that's what this first part obviously feels like. Just regardless of how hard you run, you're not going to have a ton of time to fit a max snatch in. So execution under high heart rate and under duress. But yeah, and then obviously the next one is a little bit tempting to just kind of burn it down.
So 2 things stand out to me right away with this workout, and it feels like of all the ones so far, it has the least information. So Brian, can you guess what the 2 things are that are bugging me?
Well, first of all, is there going to be a tie break for the first part is my first guess.
3 things.
Because I mean, presumably there's going to be a lot of, if it truly is establish a 1-rep max snatch after running 800 meters, there's going to be a lot of similar numbers. And
maybe your run time.
And so the run time makes sense as a tie break if you're going to have one there. The other thing that you could possibly say is how many attempts did it take for you to get that lift successful? But that was my first guess, and obviously it wasn't one of your first 2 things.
Mine was what type of run? Because the other
Yeah.
one denoted
Mine.
assault runner.
Yep.
This one just says run 800 meters.
That's definitely.
Well, let me
one
tell you
of them.
this. I am hoping and praying that somehow there's a way to run around the entire competition floor, because if there is, I don't know if Pat likes it or not, but I would be super excited to see an 800-meter sprint and all the strategies that would go into play there with 2 or 3 laps around the competition floor to close out the night.
So here's my rainy day scenario.
Oh.
The sled pull event in test 1, 84 feet across. That's roughly 25 meters.
This is
So
what I
if
was
you go out and back shuttle run
Shuttle
25
runs.
meters,
Yep.
16 times, that's 800 meters.
Mm.
So it
Please
may
no.
be a shuttle run.
Oh God.
And that would
Yeah.
be exactly like the shuttle to overhead event from the games. So it would
Yeah.
it would be a trickle down from the games. So my fear is that it's going to be an 800 meter shuttle run.
Well,
I wrote
Um,
an article last week with JR and Taylor, and I said what I expect to see at semifinals, and I said 2 running tests, and I'm really hoping that one of them is an actual run, no shuttle run, no treadmill. And you might be right, but I'm still holding out hope that we'll get
hey,
an actual run.
I try to have high hopes and low expectations. So
Well,
I
getting back
think that if it's that, then the run would be nice. I'm just concerned, like if I think the problem with that is knowing that there's 3 venues that are going to be operated by CrossFit and a bunch of other venues that are operated by other people. And is it possible to have every one of those venues have a possible running course be able to be built in the arena? That feels more unlikely to me than them just saying,
Shuttle
hey, we got the
runs.
lines on the floor already, like line it up.
I'm just like, man, if you guys were racing around the perimeter, the environment would be so amazing.
cool.
And if you're running
would be more
shuttles back
exciting.
and forth, it just loses so much drama.
Yes, and I think that 2 short events, a 1 rep max lifting event and a short sprint event, are usually 2 of the more exciting events to watch. And if you did that, you would take it completely away.
Yeah.
So I think that would be, from a spectator perspective, a massive mistake. From a testing perspective, it would be interesting. And if I'm going to test this workout this weekend, I'm going to shuttle run it, because that's about the hardest 1 rep max snatch you're going to do.
There you go.
And it is what it is. But if it's anything less than that, it's going to feel really nice by comparison. The other thing that bugs me about these is if this is 2 100-point events or if it's 2 50-point events. Because I mean, one is your score is more heavily dictated by the snatch, and the other it's more heavily dictated by your run. But it's still snatching and running for 2 events in a row. And if they're both 100 points for snatching and running, you better hope you're good at snatching and running. And if you are, you just made up any points you may have lost in the entire first day in one outing on the floor. So it just sort of feels like disproportionate rewarding for the same skill set.
Now, as far as tiebreakers here, wouldn't it just be like they just tie break each other? Wouldn't that be the easiest way to do this? So like if you have a tie on the second one, your tie break is what you ever got on whoever got the best score on the first one, and vice versa.
I just feel like if you're using chip timers, the chances of a tiebreak on the second one are extremely small compared to the chances on the first one.
Yeah. And the problem with tie breaking one event with another event is that you inadvertently make the one event worth more points. So if the run time, if say test 5, my time in test 5 is the tie break for the load on test 1, it means that my placing in test 5 is worth 100 points, but it's actually worth like 130 points, because if I get the first place there and then I win every tie that I'm in, then I get boosted for all those points as well. So it kind of makes one test worth more points.
Okay. So maybe it's just your run time on the first one. That to me,
but I think Lauren said that. If it was just your 800 run in the first part, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to the thought of shuttle runs, though, if that were possible, then where are the barbells and all the weights going to be? And is that a safety problem of the lanes next to you?
I mean, you've got enough space on the floor in test 1 for all 3 machines to presumably be at some place and still have room for that sled pull. So there's got to be space for a barbell. And really, you only need 1 barbell per lane. Probably you could just set it, vertically on the lane, and people could go there and then take off on the sideways shuttle run. So I don't think it's a space issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing that jumped to mind just from these first two announcements, and it was kind of reinforced by Pat mentioning about Linda, the structure of these, however this fits into multiple days, feels very similar to 2018. You look at like 2018 in the first collection of events, we had long machine heavy test, gymnastics, body weight heavy test with a little bit of a twist, having the handstand course in there. You had Linda, and then you had a 2-part varying snatch load event with just some like suckiness in between with the bar facing burpees. And that's kind of what you have here. I mean, now granted, you swap if tests 4 and 5 are scored separately, then it'd be a little bit different. But like, at least like I think about thematically, like a lot of this stuff, like you have Linda again, you have a body weight gymnastics test with a twist, you have a long machine heavy thing, and then you have this like varying snatch event with some wrinkles kind of thrown in.
It's kind of like copying your friend's homework and making it look a little different, right?
A little different.
Just don't copy it word for word, all right?
Yeah, 2018 was everyone holds that up as a great year. So why not borrow heavily from that? All right, well we actually have the latest tests have been revealed, so we can go to 6.
Oh, this is live reaction for Pat.
Yeah, let's.
And I gotta read it.
Here
on
we go.
screen,
So we got. Oh boy, 20 overhead squats, a 500-meter row, 3 handstand walk pirouettes, 2 seated legless rope climbs. Then you do 20 strict chest to wall handstand push-ups, and then you go back through 2 seated legless rope climbs, 3 handstand walk pirouettes, a 500-meter row, 20 overhead squats, 15-minute time cap for the men, 16-minute time cap for the women. Weight on the barbell, 125 for the women, 185 for the men. So I think you'd like this one, Pat. And this looks like it's full of stuff that you're good at.
I'm excited to see how these L rope climbs go down. Is that what it is? Seated legless
It's a
rope
seated
climb.
rope climb. So we talked about this with the teams. There's not a lot of like, does that have to be seated all the way up? Like, which would.
Well, Pat, this is where that question that I asked you earlier comes into play, because depending on what the standard for 3 handstand walk pirouettes and 2 seated legless rope climbs is for both teams and individuals. Now, my advice would be practice the hardest version of it that you can think of anyway. But if you give these athletes 24 hours notice compared to a week's notice, the level of adaptation changes.
Yeah, I agree. And that's why, I like to have less notice, because I have at least a broad skill set where something like that, nothing on that intimidates me at all. But given 3 weeks preparation, I think other people can narrow the gap. So I think my level of improvement with 3 weeks of practice is probably smaller than some other people's. So I don't know. I think that there's obviously the questions there is handstand walk pirouettes. What counts, because at the games we had a box and you had to walk in, pirouette, walk out, and that was 1.
That makes sense.
So do I have 3 boxes, or do I have 1 box and I've got to do 3 turns? So if I have to 1 box and 3 turns, is it just judge's discretion when you're done the 1, or what? Like, how is that gonna look?
Yeah, they'd have to.
I feel.
And then the seated rope climb, I'm just like, when we had this briefing at the games, the standard on the seated rope climb made my head spin, and I was like, I couldn't understand how they were going to fairly judge this across the field.
For the alpaca?
Oh, I couldn't. It was like a novel. Like it would be.
It was. I've heard it. I have heard it reiterated, and for me personally, knowing that there were whatever number of games athletes there last year that will be competing in semifinals this year that have gotten that briefing, and then the rest of the competitive semifinalists have not been given that information, I think that's a competitive disadvantage. And that's why I think that for this movement in particular, that the standard should be known now.
Oh, I would agree with that. I think that they should let us know it. But
what was it at the games?
At the games, it was like,
you didn't. Well, you didn't have to be like in the seated position.
I can try to describe this.
Right?
You didn't have to. I don't think you had to hold an L the whole time. You started seated, but once you're Yeah. Go. You can
You
go ahead.
did. You had to make an effort to hold an L the whole time. You had a starting line on the bottom of the rope, which you could, once your hands passed the starting line, your feet had to be off the ground in an L. You climbed to the top, and I believe it wasn't a touch on the beam. It was just there was a tape at the top that you had to get both hands higher than for like a safety thing, so you weren't like one-handed flailing. And then you had to come down, I think, to the bottom tape again. And so the question is like, what's an L? What's a reasonable effort to hold an L? There was also a rule of that the rope couldn't go between your legs. You had to keep the rope to the side of your legs.
Yeah.
And the people said like, well, what happens if I'm climbing and the rope works its way in between my legs? And they're like, well, then you have to make an effort to get it out of there. But what counts as that? Or when
What
is the
does
judge
making
going
an
to tell you
effort
if it's a no
mean?
rep? Totally. It was very, very subjective across the board, which
Yeah.
I think is a huge challenge. And that's where I look at something like test 2 burpee get up over the box. Like that's so like if it's just do a burpee, get yourself to the other side of the box, use your hands, use your feet, use your head. I don't give a shit. That's super objective and very easy to judge. And more movements should be done that way because it makes it easier and more fair across the board. So something like this, yeah, people will practice it, and if we don't get the rule or the standard until the briefing, whether or not you see it done week 1, you could be seeing something that like one lane's letting something go, one's not, somebody's doing it a certain way and getting away with it. Like it doesn't necessarily communicate what the actual standard is. So I hope that they release some information on it, because there's just like if it has very subjective elements to it like that, that's really challenging. The way that this is written as just legless and not L, I hope it's just you start seated, and once you go up, if your legs start to dangle down, whatever, like that's fine.
Yeah, it would seem.
It should
So
be
I was
fine.
going to ask you, like, given the fact that you sat through that briefing last year, how would you simplify it? And it sounds like that would be the easiest way to do that. What you just mentioned.
Yeah, and it's different. It's a different movement. Like having to hold an L sit the whole time is different, and it's more challenging. And same thing, the way it's written, I don't know if you have to control your descent. Do I have to climb down? Like I would say if you did, it should say legless up and down or something like that. So the way I read that is a seated start, legless rope climb, touch the top, let go. That's how it reads to me.
Yeah.
And that's not at all what it was at the games. So they're very, very different. So it will be interesting to see what it is. Like looking at it like that, there's no way to know. I know Boz was very excited about those L rope climbs at the games, so I kind of thought we would see them. So I'm kind of surprised in a way to not see them be written more like what we thought they were at the games. But we'll see. I mean, I think that this is a lot of shoulder fatigue again.
Yeah.
This is a lot of strict pulling, a lot of strict pressing.
Do you think
there's
that
a lot of places you can fail in this workout,
especially with the
that
overhead squats at the end? Sorry.
Yeah.
you think there might
See,
be a
I
new
almost think that's the least.
Do you
You
think
don't
there might
think
be a
I think-
nuance to the chest to wall handstand push-ups, a deficit or something additional to what we've seen previously?
I don't know. What did we? No, I don't know. I don't think it needs it.
I think again, you're getting into that territory of like what part of the head needs to cross the line. Like if you just put your head on the ground, push up, stay in this box or whatever it is, and keep it as simple as possible. Do you even do handstand push-ups like facing away from the wall anymore, Pat?
Yeah, I've done them a bit.
Yeah.
One, I think you have to do like if you're gonna do deficit kipping handstand push-ups, how are you gonna do them?
Yeah.
Like there's certain movements that we still need to
I wouldn't.
be
That
able
would
to
be the
do,
answer.
right? And I mean, I've been doing more chest to wall and more, but I think that that's a very strict handstand push-up, and you're only doing a certain style doing that. But
Upside down.
yeah, you try to mix it all in there. There's just more and more balls to keep in the air every year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. There's lots of areas to fail on that one, so that'll be interesting to see.
I don't know. I see the 20 overhead squats at 185 at the end of that, and I see a couple people getting off the row at the same time, and it's Sunday, and I see a couple people just starting to get like, I feel bad because this is almost like a ricochet shot at, but I had the visual in my head of Brent back in 2014 at the Canada West Regional on those, like trying to push the pace a little bit on those overhead squats, and the shoulders start to give way.
Well, good thing is I think he'll probably get dropped on those handstand push-ups, so he might be able to relax a bit by the time he gets to the race over.
Wow. That's fired.
Oh,
All right. Well, that takes us to test 7. This is the last one. 3 rounds for time of a 15 or 10 Echo Bike calorie ride, 20 toes to bar, and then a 60-foot sandbag bear hug carry. 6-minute time cap, 200-pound sandbag for the women, 150-pound sandbag for the men. So is traditional at semifinal / regionals, you get a final event that is going to end with some sort of race down the floor. And it would be on that 60-foot sandbag bear hug carry. So this is a sprint.
Yeah, why do the women get 5 less calories?
Uh-huh.
why are we
Pretty
using
big
why are we
drop-off.
using an Echo Bike twice?
I agree with that. I don't know why with no rower we have 2 Echo Bike workouts.
No, we did have row in test.
Row
Row
is
500
Oh,
meters.
you're right. Yeah, 2
Yeah.
500 meter rows.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's a very the row doesn't seem to be that critical in that workout, but it is there.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think. Yeah. It's not as sprinty as you maybe think it is.
Really? Well, okay. Why is that?
I mean,
Just 'cause of the
60
reps?
toes to bar isn't,
Yeah.
isn't
60
that,
toes is a lot.
I'm curious. I bet you that bear hug carry is just out, then back, then out to the finish.
That's what I think too.
So there's a fairly long transition in the second round.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, yeah, you probably have to push that bike pretty hard, but
I kind of like
don't
I
know,
like this
it's
workout.
fast. 3-round workouts are fast.
yeah.
I like it as a final because you know that people are going to have to take a risk. Do you risk it on the bike? Do you risk it on the bar? And what's the result of risking it early in round 3 with the midline?
Well, like
Yeah,
I think you'll see a lot of people like very close in that first round too. Like everyone comes out and everyone's pretty close, and it's like, okay, who's gonna hit the NOS button here?
Yeah, I think I mean, to your point, Brian, the 6 and 7 both, there's a lot of risk in both of those workouts. And so that's like the Sunday thing where if the people are in bubble positions or they need to fight for a spot and you've got to decide Sunday morning it's time to go, there's a lot of risk in that event 6. And here, if you've got to really do something you're not comfortable with, the walls can come crashing down real fast, and you can feel stuck out there. Like everybody knows how bad an Echo Bike can shut you down if you do something really stupid. And I remember seeing guys in the 200-pound Husafeld bag in 2021 on a relatively short workout doing with the rope climbs and stuff, struggling to carry the bag and like shutting down. And like that was different arm fatigue. But here, if it's like grip and you have that really shut down legs, people could drop the bag in one of those rounds or near the end there, have to try to make a push for it and not quite make it, and have to try to if you start fumbling the bag there in those rounds, you're losing a lot of time.
We're gonna see some repeat face plants from Rogue.
I was gonna say,
Oh,
just
for
Medeiros
sure.
and Laura just dive bombing
For
across the
sure,
finish
for
line.
sure. Because that last one, if you're in a foot race with a bag in that last round, yeah, for sure you will. People are going to dive for that line.
When you're holding a sandbag of that weight, obviously it's going to have, just from an overall muscular fatigue, it takes an effect. But anytime I do like a strongman event, they always talk about when you have something heavy like that, just makes your breathing so much more awkward. How do you manage that, during a sandbag carry? How do you manage your breathing to make sure that doesn't happen to you?
It's hard to do. I think that's one of the things in this workout is you got to figure out where you can breathe. Because if you're holding your breath on that bike and you're ripping through your toes to bars, not breathing, and then you're holding your breath on the bag, you're going to get halfway through the second round and start to fall apart. So, I front load carries are not a bad thing for me because I have long arms. I can kind of like rest it a bit lower and my chest is free. So I don't get a lot of advantages, but that's one of them. And I don't know. I think that it depends too. Like on that point, I occasionally judges force me to like carry it up instead of letting it sit down, which actually is a huge disadvantage. So it depends what I'm allowed to do, but it's hard. Like you're crushing your diaphragm. You're holding heavy weight against your chest. Like I don't think there's a way around it. That's the test, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the problem. That's the whole point. because yeah, it's hard, and you know, your breathing's going to be really labored, and you're probably going to want to stop and take a few free breaths before you pick up the bag, but you won't be able to.
Yeah. All right. Well,
that one looks pretty fun. That one, like,
yeah,
that'll be a good finish.
What one are you most excited for?
I don't know. It's an impossible question to answer.
Pat stares
They all-
jadedly into the
They all
look.
they all hurt in a different way, right? So I would say that strict handstand push-up, seated legless one looks pretty fun. I think that the muscle up complex one will be interesting and kind of fun to do. I like stuff like that where it's new and fresh. Like Echo Bike Toast Bar bag carry, like cool. Like I do something like that like once a week. So it's less novel and less fun. Like I think that those, even if test one with the long sled drag, like something like that's cool. We don't get to do that very often, and it's hard to set up. Like I don't have a 100-foot rope at my gym, so like I couldn't set that up if I wanted to. And those are the kind of fun ones when you actually get to competition that are cool to do. It's something new and exciting, right? So
I'll tell you
I'd
what, I
say
got to
those
use
three
those
are
100-foot
probably.
ropes. I got to use the 100-foot ropes at Mayhem earlier this year. And I really hope they force the hand over hand as it's written, because over 100 feet, it's doable for a certain amount of distance. And eventually you really want to resort to that double arm pull.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, the last time I would have done it was at the rope chipper for that length, and it was heavier. So, you know, but again, that doesn't mean much. Depends how the floor sticks. So I don't know. Maybe I'll be good at it. Maybe I'll be terrible, but it'll be interesting, and I'll find out once I get on the floor. So, you know, that stuff's cool. I agree. I'd like to see them have some form of standard on that, but I think it's something that they need to think about, because there have been a lot of events like that in the past. You know, the assault banger, the rope chipper was a great example, where they have some guidelines and they say, oh, just you have to stand in this box and pull. Don't let your feet come out of the box. So if you start really reefing and leaning back and you step a foot out, there was no penalty. So you could just keep doing that. And they would say, hey, don't do that. And then you just
keep doing
then
it.
you say okay, and then you do it 3 more times, and then the workout's done, and you never got a penalty. So if they're going to apply a standard like that, there needs to be a thought out what happens when someone doesn't do it. You know, if I start doing big double arm pulls or turn around and start walking backwards and just pulling it, like what are you going to do? What are you going to do to stop me? Like, do I have to run back out and push the sled back? Do I have to go do 5 burpees and then start pulling again? Or like, what's the penalty? Because we have been lots of events like that in the past, with elements like that, particularly moving odd implements. And we've asked those questions in briefings and basically just been told, just don't do it. And you can say, oh, I won't do it, but the guy next to me starts doing it. What are you going to do? And they say, don't do it. So there needs to be an obvious and premeditated penalty that is very clear. And then again, the standard needs to be quite objective, so it's easy to determine if someone's not doing what they're supposed to. So like, because of that, I kind of doubt they're going to impose a standard like that. Because like, at what point, if I'm pulling hand over hand and then I'm getting tired of my last pull, I go hand pull like this. Was that an illegal double arm pull, or what was that?
Yeah.
And who's going to make the call? And like, so it's hard. The more rules you introduce, the more ways there are to break the rules, and the more penalties you have to think about. And so again, objective and simpler is better. If it's just move sled from here to here, pull the sled however you feel most comfortable, that's probably the best way to keep it fair. But I agree. I like the hand over hand pull, and I think it would be fun to make people do it.
Yeah. All right. Well, how many times are you going to practice these?
Probably actually once. I'll probably do them all this weekend, and then I'll do like maybe bits and pieces of it, some like combinations of things. There's a chance after watching the first week for something like that running snatch one, if I practiced it a completely different way and the setup is like way different, I might do part of that or like one half of it to just feel what it's going to feel like. But yeah, I think that there's no real benefit to doing it more than once. See what it's going to feel like, and then you can go from there. To be honest, I think there's a few of them I probably don't even really have to practice, but I will anyways for the sake of doing the whole weekend. and then we'll just probably not even exercise for the next week after that. I might just chill, just eat and get fat and wish everybody else luck.
I would love to compare your kind of couple weeks of prep leading up to someone who's never been there before, and just see like what the anxiety between each of you, because I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Would be an amazing like super cut for like a documentary or a road to the games. It's like this rookie that's just on pins and needles the entire time, and it cuts over to Pat. He's like
eating ice cream
and like throwing out baby
I don't know.
diapers.
It might not be as dramatic as you picture it, but I'd say my life outside of the gym is probably significantly different. My life inside the gym is still, like I said, I still get nervous and I know what's on the line, and there's a lot of people who want to take my spot, so I think that I take it pretty seriously when I'm lining up to do it, and I get as nervous as anybody, but I have done it a few times, and I think I'm getting better at perspective. So I try to remember, like, the whole next week, 2 weeks, like, there's no sense losing sleep over any of this. It's not going to help anyway. So
Pat, I feel like I should know this question, but when was the last time, or how many times have you and Brent competed at the qualifying stage of the games against each other?
Never.
That's what I thought.
Wow.
Until the second week.
That's kind of crazy.
Would you count?
Let me think about that quickly, actually.
Would you count Dubai 2020 season?
Yes, that would be the only one, I guess, because that was sanctioned that year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you owe him a little something.
Yeah. So that's one. Yeah. We'll see. I think these workouts probably lean my way more than his.
I was just thinking about it. Like, you guys have been the mantle holders for Canada for a long time, but your paths to qualification for the games have never overlapped outside of that 1 year.
Yeah, I've been living out west now since 2019, and I've still never competed in the West. So I started in the East, and I competed there in the early part of my career and lived there when I was in school, but I haven't lived there for years. And it's just like, I think I'm still in everyone's head. I'm from the East and I live in the East, but I was born in the West. I grew up in the West. I went to the East for like a few years of school, and now I'm just like, I've been stapled there ever since. So it'll be fun. It'll be fun to compete in the West for the first time, actually. And, I actually don't have to fly across the whole continent to go compete in my semifinal. I'm in the same time zone for like the first time ever. It's going to be great.
I don't know, man. You got some East in you. I heard you speaking French to a bunch of those guys in Dubai that one time when we were at like the Prince's like racetrack. You started laying down a little French to the guys to keep some secrets, and that doesn't just happen.
That's the best part. I'm like a secret agent. I'm in on everybody's game. So I just need to learn Icelandic, and it's all over for everybody.
Oh yeah. This is the last question I have for you, and then we can let you go. But since you're going to be competing with Brent, and I don't know if you want to give this away, but what is the one thing that you can do to get him rattled? Say to him, like, do you hide his shoes? Like, do you have what is it that's gonna get into that guy's head?
Brent will get in his own head. You don't have to do a whole lot. You have to. So here's So what I did at Wodapalooza before we started, that check-in, you got to test the drag ropes for our swimming event, and there are 3 different sizes. So you go over, and we both own drag ropes. Like, you already know what your length is. You just go to like double check it, do the dance to confirm your size. But I went and I knew I was taking a small rope, but I went over and I grabbed the longest rope and I wrapped it around my hands a couple times, and then I did a few reps like that. And then I hung it up and I went and told the person doing the check-in that I was going to take the small rope. And then Brent went over there and tested every rope, wrapping it on 1 finger, 2 fingers, whole hand, trying this technique like every different way he could. And I just went and stood on the railing next to his coach. And his coach is like, "Did you just do that to spin him out?" I was like, so all you have to do is like do something a little different or a little weird, and he's like wondering why he didn't think of it, or if there's a competitive advantage to be gained there. And you can keep him up for a few extra hours that night, I'm sure.
At what point did you tell him that you were messing with him?
He probably did.
I don't think I ever did. He asked me afterwards. But yeah, no, it was Anyways,
So good.
Yeah.
Oh,
sometimes it's the little things you have to take
You know?
pleasure in, right? You gotta
Uh-huh.
love your work.
Well, Pat, thanks so much for doing this with us. We really appreciate it, and looking forward to you throwing down at the West semifinal, and hope we have some good shenanigans that are not too costly or anything malicious between you and Brett.
No, it's all good fun. I've never tried to stand in anybody's way of being like, as good a competitor as they
Yeah.
can be, but you gotta have some fun back there, right?
Absolutely.
I'm looking
Brett just
forward
seems like an
to.
easy target.
Yeah, it can be. We all can be, right? You just gotta know which buttons to push.
Yeah.